Hello, everybody. So the talk of the day will be about consent for third-party tracking, which, as you know, might be quite a privacy-invasive practice. But the thing with that topic is it also encompasses both aspects of computer sciences for the technical part of the analysis and also aspects of law, so the regulatory aspect of it. And that's the reason why we've teamed up together with Konrad and many other co-authors that are mentioned to look at that issue from a very interdisciplinary perspective. So of the team, Konrad is a computer scientist of the team, and we're very happy to present very briefly some of the outline of our research. So the first question that we were wondering was just, do you actually need consent? Because people talk about consent quite a lot, and usually consent is seen as really the golden standard, and that's something that you should achieve when you're tracking. And
yeah, consent is essentially, everyone on the web, right? Well,
yeah, exactly. And that's part of the solution. And I would agree, actually. As a lawyer, I would say consent is probably the only viable option that you have. And the reason for that is, it's a combined reason, actually, because you have the e-privacy directive that people might know about already, that says that if you want to actually access or store data on the user's device, which you definitely do when you are engaging in third-party tracking, you essentially need consent. So there's actually very little way around that when you're actually accessing or storing data. And that's the reason why consent is really one of the most important options that you have when it comes to tracking.
And what about GDPR? The massive privacy law in the EU.
Yeah, GDPR is definitely relevant as well. And GDPR also lays down rules about the actual validity of the consent and the actual lawfulness as well. But that would be a bit much for today's talk. So if you're interested, I would really encourage you to read the paper because we detail that there. But the short answer is consent is mandatory, and that's mostly due to e-privacy. But what we were most interested in was really the absence or the presence, and you will tell us that now, of consent mechanism in apps. So whether there was any kind of consent mechanism implemented there.
Yeah, sure. What we did to learn about the presence of consent mechanisms in apps is analyze a representative sample from the Google Play Store of 1,300 apps. And we opened every single one of these apps, looked at whether these apps asked for consent, and at the same time, we monitored their network traffic and analyzed, well, where does data go to what companies? And what we found is that while more than 70% of apps send data to tracking companies, and that's even before any user interaction. At the same time,
even before clicking on the accept button, for instance.
You just open it and your data goes out there to Facebook, Google, many other companies. Right at the start, yes, that's right. And less than 9.9% of apps actually ask users for consent. So that's a huge discrepancy.
So that's quite worrying indeed, especially since we didn't look at the quality of the consent as well. So we just looked at whether there was any type of affirmative action required by the user of the app, not even whether they were sufficiently informed clicking accept, for instance. So that's also another issue.
Yeah, well, actually, only 3.5% of apps allowed users to refuse consent. Otherwise, apps would just quit. So that
which is really worrying, actually. App developers even supported in their efforts in implementing consent, for instance, or are they left on their own without any kind of guidance as to how to do it?
What we did is look at 13 trackers and their online guidance to just find out, well, why do developers in so large numbers don't do the right thing, don't fulfill the legal requirements? And what we found is that the guidance provided by trackers is just, while very mixed. We found lots of outdated or broken information, as you can see from the slide, with Google, Facebook, other companies. So overall, it's just not a pleasant experience of trying to implement consent to tracking in apps.
So wrapping up now, it doesn't look very bright, right? Because while consent is actually necessary, it's not really done in practice. There is no consent or very few. And if you're motivated to actually implement any kind of consent, well, the guidance that you'll find is actually very scarce and not really available or even accessible. So it's kind of a dark picture, isn't it, Konrad?
Well, I think it's changing, but change is slow.